Scrolling in bed with nothing to do, every film fan at some point has come across first and final frames. A Twitter account created by Jacob T. Swinney that contrasts the first and final frame to highlight a film's journey, but particularly fetishize the ones that come full circle. Sometimes it is just beautiful shots and, well, it's always objectively beautiful shots. But if you haven't seen the film, do the images mean anything? That subjective experience is important, because personally, my favourite first and final shot, I haven't seen on the account. Here are those shots. Am I right, or am I right? These are the most meaningful and beautiful shots. Okay, maybe it's not obvious. The shots are from Buddies, a 1985 low-budget drama film directed by Arthur J. Bressan Jr. The film begins with opening credits overlaid over this litany of people's names who have died of AIDS, obviously and objectively a tragedy, but providing no personal connection. The names are laid out in a bare and bureaucratic format, monotonously being printed from a machine. We're introduced to David, a gay man in New York in a happy relationship, and crucially is a passionate typesetter. His current job is on a new book titled The AIDS Reader. He's not particularly radical, but by working on this book decides to volunteer at the gay centre and enter into the buddy system. A real scheme back in the 80s and 90s where AIDS patients who had no one to see them because a family disowned them or unaware of their queerness or friends are too afraid of them, get a buddy to keep them company. A lot of this is because of an unnecessary contagion panic, and even David first enters the room of his new buddy, Robert, in full PPE. Robert asks why he's wearing all of that, and David admits,
"Well, I did feel sort of silly getting into this. But I've never done this sort of thing before."
revealing his character as politically naive, isolated from his community, and guarded emotionally.
I mean, it's just that I'm not used to being asked about my private life.
But David does begin to keep a record with Robert because
I've already started to do what I always do with Steve, my friends, and myself. Fixing up what I really think so it sounds acceptable. I'm gonna try and write the truth in this journal. First, I don't think I even like Robert Willow. I feel sappy about trying to help. I think I'm doing it to make me feel good. At the center, they said I must keep an objective distance or else I may not even be able to help him.
but he's misguided in thinking objectivity is truth and truth is objective. It is their fourth meeting that we see the objective run against the subjective when David proudly shows off his work.
And I've figured out a way to lay out this material so it'll be very simple to read. Looks like a book set to go. See, that's the difference between typesetting and word processing. It's camera ready.
Almost detailing the difference between the objective and subjective. Robert reads one of the articles.
AIDS is perhaps the harsh but real retribution of a God too long neglected. Nature's revenge on an unnatural minority's arrogant disregard of her elemental law. What's in this book you're doing?
Well, it has all different points of view in it.
And this is whose point of view?
Robert hurts himself, coughing and spluttering, just to shout down that article, and we are presented with it in its perfectly typeset form. Later we see David emotionally struggle to transcribe the book. But then the computer objectively processes it. A book objectively presenting every view ignores the subjective lens of one's own experience and moral responsibilities. Much like David, who wonders about Robert.
What sort of a man could feel so personally attacked by the words on those galley sheets? I have never seen a response so inappropriate.
But responses to stories are what makes them so important. Everything between where something started and where it will end. The home movies of Robert the two men watch together, David later, in a fantasy, inserts himself into them. something he can't do with his work as a typesetter. David finally realizes that
I've gotten too close to him. And my big try to be objective and to tell the truth in this journal is a farce.
Gay day?
Uh-huh.
when David brings in a tape of a pride parade, he also expresses he has no need to participate. Robert retorts,
Well, to me, it stands for not letting the world say that I'm not here. That there's only supposed to be straight people, straight love, straight pain.
Yeah, but why cut yourself off with the gay label? Why separate yourself from everybody else?
I only feel separated when I have to lie and say that I'm straight, when I'm really gay. Do you think that if straight senators and their straight sons had AIDS, that all that money that's being held up in Washington, and I read this in those galley sheets you brought in, that all that money would be taking so long to come down to research and hospices here in New York City with the most dead and the most cases, and me, I'm just a number in a pile. Here in the Big Apple, there's not even an AIDS clinic.
I'm part of the whole human race rather than just half of it.
This parade, this tacky once-a-year freak show, is my one chance to feel connected. Because they're not all just gay people marching in that crowd. There's a lot of straight people, parents and grandparents. And in that sense, in that moment, then we are all just people. And the gay label vanishes because we're together without having to deny the differences.
a beautiful sentiment responding to the documentary they're watching, Gay USA, which moreover is also directed by Bressan Jr., and has a similar mission statement.
The major concept in the film was to show the mass of gay people and then individuate that mass with close-ups, interviews. So we cut from aerial crowd shots showing 100,000 people marching to a direct close-up of a woman talking about coming out, about losing her job for being gay, about the pressures she's been under. And that was our main concept, to cut from mass shots to close-ups, to show the movement and also the individuals in that movement.
David must come to terms with being an individual within the larger whole. For a while we see no other characters. Off-screen is a boyfriend, a trainer, a journalist, a boss, a mother. But then, even though the once guarded David is still the focus, we begin to see those other characters. David is not separated by his label. Buddies was the first narrative film to deal with the AIDS epidemic, meaning it was to lead to one inevitable end.
Robert died early this morning, in his sleep. I'm sorry you had to find out this way.
Of course, Hollywood would later appropriate AIDS for their own tragedies, mostly focusing on the heterosexual reaction. But as an independent film, Buddies boasts an energy missing from many AIDS films in the 80s, few of which showed any fury at the lack of action by Ronald Reagan's administration. This is demonstrated when David does what Robert would do with One Last Healthy Day.
I'd take the People's Express and I'd fly to Washington, D.C. And I'd have a 2x4 and a magic marker and a piece of cardboard. And I'd be a one-man picket outside the White House. Just a gesture, you know, very Don Quixote. And I'd write something on the cardboard like, America, AIDS is not a gay disease. It hurts everybody. Release all the money for research and care.
The subjective in the objective finally comes when a newspaper prints about David's time with Robert, typesetting around a picture of him as a young, handsome man, which a reader must confront. In the interview, David says, hey, what does he say? Where's the quote?
Wait, I have it right here. People have to feel the pain and anguish like it was happening to them. So when a person comes down with AIDS, we are all taken a little sick. Straight or gay, it doesn't matter.
But also people can't make their subjectivity the objective. When David rebukes the idea that God sent an AIDS plague, his mum asks,
What did you mean?
That a lot of people imagine that God is just like they are. You know, a big copy of themselves. Well, Robert says that a cruel God ain't no God at all.
When the credits roll over the repeated shot, the cruel reality of the names who have died from AIDS. The film has provided you with a subjective between the first and last shot. To a government, a statistician, a bureaucrat, this is just a long list, a pile of numbers. But to us, each of these names is an important individual. They shouldn't be ignored. They are not a Robert. They are just as unique as him, and are him. The micro viewpoint, unlike other AIDS movies ending in death, highlights and does not sanitize the macro viewpoint of the horror. At best, we hope a government official would find it overwhelming, but to us it is heartbreaking. Arthur J. Bressan Jr. said, "We've made a simple, human, powerful movie about something more than just a medical illness. Because Buddies is not just about AIDS, it's about what happens when a person, a lone individual, has to face not only death, but the fear and ignorance of all of us, society." As we lay stuck in our beds, separate from everyone, remember there are no final frames. The printer is still printing.